Hello, everyone, and welcome to this detailed revision episode focusing on 12 essential quotations that you really must know for Macbeth. Now, these lines and the way I've organized this podcast episode, it moves chronologically through the play. And what we're going to be doing is tracing Macbeth's tragic journey from vaunted and celebrated warrior to tyrant and, quote, dead butcher. So for each quotation, I'm going to give you the very precise context in which the quotation occurs. I'm going to give you very rich word level analysis, very, very important in our essays that we are unpicking Shakespeare's language, and then also making some very ambitious thematic links across the play, connecting the quotation to other quotations and other key moments over the course of Macbeth. Now, if you learn these 12 lines from the play in detail, in depth, they will serve to underpin almost any essay on Macbeth you could be asked to write. So let's begin then at the very start of the play. And so quotation one is, quote, "Fair is foul, and foul is fair." Now, this is taken from Act 1, Scene 1, and it is spoken by the witches in that opening scene during thunder and lightning. It's a quotation that frames the entire play in a kind of moral confusion. Good is bad, and bad is good. And so if we move to the analysis then, what we've got here is a strange paradox, almost like a puzzle. And we've got a puzzle, a paradox, fair and foul. Fair is foul, foul is fair. Good is bad, and bad is good. What this quotation does is shakes up or destabilizes the relationship between appearance, how things appear, and morality, good and evil. This inversion, good is bad, bad is good, suggests that what seems noble on the outside may actually conceal or hide moral corruption. And it's a line then that introduces the play's main concern, appearance versus reality. Shakespeare is signalling that the moral order of Scotland, where the play is set, is actually under threat, and it seems to be under threat even before Macbeth arrives on stage. Now, if we're going to make some cross-textual links, we should, of course, immediately be noting that Macbeth appears to subconsciously echo this very line when he first appears in Act 1, Scene 3. Macbeth famously says, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen." And that serves to link at the level of language. It links Macbeth to the witches before Macbeth has even actually encountered the three weird sisters. Perhaps then those three weird sisters in Act 1, Scene 3 are exerting a supernatural power on Macbeth without him realizing. Lady Macbeth later is going to embody and almost re-articulate this paradox, fair is foul and foul is fair, when she tells Macbeth to, quote, "look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. Appear fair," she might say, "but actually be foul underneath." And of course, this breakdown of fair is foul and foul is fair, this is going to culminate in Macbeth himself in his sense of despair and indeed nihilism in Act 5. So a really, really key quotation. Fair is foul and foul is fair. The alliteration and, of course, the different rhythm or form of poetic meter being employed by Shakespeare, also serves to create that incantatory spell-like quality, which is so important in all of the witches' speech too. So it does feel fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. The rhyme, the meter, the alliteration creates that incantatory or spell-like, enchanting, magical quality, which again is a reminder of the supernatural magical powers of the witches, these forces obviously of evil. Now, we're going to move on to Act 1, Scene 4, and the quote is, again, a very famous one, "Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires." So the context here is that Duncan names Malcolm Prince of Cumberland, makes him official heir to the throne. And so Macbeth privately, as an aside, acknowledges that Malcolm stands between him and the crown. Of course, he is not declaring this out loud to the other characters on stage. Okay, Macbeth is uttering this individually, privately to himself. And so what we've got then is Macbeth's private acknowledgement that Malcolm is this obstacle. He is impeding him from the golden round. He is in the way and is going to potentially prevent him from realizing his ambition, which of course is to become king. Now, if we look at the key words being employed here, we've got black and deep, and both of those words suggest the moral darkness of Macbeth's ambition. Hide, of course, implies and is connected to shame and secrecy. I think in that word hide, we can see a recognition on Macbeth's part that he knows his desires are wrong. He knows they are shameful, and yet, obviously, he still wants to enact them. He still wants to become king. And so it's a moment where Macbeth really clearly articulates murderous intent, I think we can say. He turns away from light, that symbol of goodness and truth and divine order and God himself, and he's embracing hidden evil. Note the contrast here then with Duncan's trusting nature in the very same scene. Duncan famously says there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. Way too trusting. Okay? Far too trusting. That is perhaps Duncan's real downfall, his trusting nature. Okay? There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face is a beautifully poetic way of saying there's no way of telling what someone really is thinking and feeling simply by looking at their face. And if you are prepared to hide your black and deep desires, then if you are going to do that from the far too trusting Duncan, you've got a real chance of deceiving that king. It also foreshadows this quotation, stars hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires, foreshadows that later motif of unnatural darkness that we get surrounding Duncan's murder, obviously in Act 2. And we can connect to Macbeth's later belief that he must hide his motives from everyone. Let your remembrance apply to Banquo. Okay, so it's this idea of deception, hiding your desires from others, hiding your black and deep desires, we should say, which is so critical to that appearance versus reality theme that we were discussing in the previous quotation too. Okay, quotation number 3, Unsex me here, taken from Act 1, Scene 5. Now, this is where Lady Macbeth receives Macbeth's letter, and she calls upon supernatural forces to strip or remove her feminine qualities so that she can be deeply involved in this plan to commit regicide. Now, that word unsex, which is so critical to our understanding, really epitomizes or sums up that rejection of early modern gender expectations, particularly tied to the female body. So it's a rejection of compassion, it's a rejection of maternal nurturing, it's a rejection of moral restraint. It is a line then that thematically merges gender, so what it means to be a woman. It connects to ambition, willingness to kind of do anything, and indeed to commune with evil spirits to do what needs to be done to realize those ambitions, and of course the supernatural. Lady Macbeth seems to believe that power requires the rejection of femininity, kind of womanhood itself, and that's revealing of Shakespeare's exploration of patriarchal pressures and identity. Her rejection of feminine traits here contrasts very ironically with her later breakdown, where she becomes very stereotypically weak and feminine. Of course, think of a quotation like, all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. It's also a quotation that links to Macbeth's own reliance on supernatural guidance and Macbeth's connection to the witches, but it also reinforces their early partnership. She is a critical driving force in their decision to engage in regicide. Okay, quotation number 4. Quote, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. Now, we're still in Act 1, Scene 5 here, and this is Lady Macbeth advising Macbeth to deceive Duncan and the other guests during Duncan's visit to their castle. Analytically, we're immediately drawn to the word serpent. It's a noun that alludes to the story of the biblical fall, Adam and Eve's tempting by the serpent in the Garden of Eden, eating the apple from the tree of knowledge, and so on. And it's therefore a word, the word serpent, which suggests temptation, betrayal, and a kind of moral collapse. It's a line that is the single clearest expression of that crucial theme, appearance versus reality. Here, Lady Macbeth is establishing the blueprint, kind of the plan they're going to follow for Macbeth's deception and manipulation of others. Now, thinking across the course of the play, it echoes fair is foul and foul is fair from Act 1, Scene 1. But it also reminds us later on, or we could connect it to later on, when Macbeth himself masks his own intentions from Lady Macbeth. He says, be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck. Of course, he's referring there to the plan to kill Banquo and also to kill Fleance. And we can connect, I suppose, this quotation more generally to the way this strategy collapses as Macbeth, over the course of the play, becomes increasingly paranoid and isolated. And indeed, as that previous quotation, be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck, we can also connect it to how Macbeth and Lady Macbeth become really isolated from one another. Macbeth starts to kind of deceive or hide himself from his own wife. He takes her advice there rather too far, we might say. Okay, quotation 5, vaulting ambition. So just that phrase, quote, vaulting ambition from Act 1, Scene 7. And this is that very famous soliloquy where Macbeth is debating with himself whether or not he's going to kill King Duncan, whether he's going to go ahead with committing regicide. He lists to himself all the reasons not to, and he concludes that it's only his ambition which is pushing him towards murder. Now, the word vaulting is really, really key here because it implies a dangerous, uncontrolled leap, ambition that is exceeding its own limits, if you will. Thematically, of course, his ambition is Macbeth's tragic flaw, his hamartia. And his awareness of his own limitation there, his own tragic flaw, heightens the sense of tragedy. He knows he is choosing destructive ambition and desire over moral duty. Now, ambition in Shakespeare's day was pejorative. It was a negative word. It was a word that at the time would be very, very closely associated with pride, arrogance, and hubris. Ambition in Shakespeare's day didn't have the positive associations that it has in 2025. You might be told, that's a really good ambition. That in Shakespeare's day, ambition is almost entirely negative. And it's important to understand that. It's about that disruption of the great chain of being, that sense that Macbeth is challenging the divine order of things by overleaping, by vaulting, by moving beyond or exceeding the limits that God has laid down. And he knows ultimately it's going to have destructive consequences for himself and for others. Now, later, Macbeth will recognize in a very famous and wonderful image that he's basically trapped himself in his own flaw. He says in Act 3, Scene 4, I am in blood, stepped in so far. This image of Macbeth in this kind of river of blood, soaked in blood. Why? Because he's given in to his vaulting ambitions. Note too, though, that Banquo serves as Macbeth's moral foil. Banquo is able to resist the witch's temptation. Banquo does not have the tragic and fatal flaw that his partner on the battlefield possesses, and therefore Banquo is Macbeth's moral foil. Okay? And then finally, think about those consequences of ambition. His vaulting ambition damages not just himself, it damages all of Scotland. Scotland suffers. Okay, in a sense, reality itself suffers. Okay, the world suffers because of Macbeth's vaulting ambition. Okay, quotation 6, halfway through. Quote, "Is this a dagger which I see before me?" And this is from Act 2, Scene 1. So this is on the night of Duncan's murder. Crucially, it is prior to, so before Duncan's murder. And Macbeth hallucinates, sees a dagger, and the dagger is leading him towards King Duncan, the king's chamber. Now, the dagger symbolizes Macbeth's fractured psychological state and descent into a kind of deranged or mad hallucination. It represents both temptation and guilt. It also, think about daggers compared to swords, it's not smoking with bloody execution on the battlefield. A dagger, when do people use daggers? They use daggers to betray, to kill someone secretly, slyly. It's a weapon that we would associate with betrayal rather than heroism on the battlefield, which we would more closely associate with a sword. Now, in this moment, Shakespeare is blurring the line between supernatural influence and psychological instability. Macbeth is both compelled, drawn forward, and kind of repelled and disgusted by the violence he is about to commit. Now, we can link this ghostly hallucination and vision to Banquo's ghost in Act 3. It's another hallucination or another vision reflecting and symbolizing Macbeth's sense of guilt. We can also connect it to Lady Macbeth's visions in Act 5. Okay, so the sense in which these ghostly hallucinations, these ghostly visions are symbolic of psychological disruption, that fractured, damaged psychological state of guilt. And it, I think, in some ways reflects Macbeth's inability to distinguish reality from illusion, what's true and what isn't, as tyranny over the course of the play consumes him. Okay, quotation 7, quote, "Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand?" Act 2, Scene 2. So this quotation is moments after murdering Duncan. Macbeth returns to his chamber. Okay, Lady Macbeth is there, and Macbeth is horrified by the blood on his hands. Now, the reference to Neptune, the god of the sea and the oceans, emphasizes the scale of what he has done. Not even an entire ocean can cleanse him of this regicidal sin. Of course, the blood symbolizes guilt, the hands, responsibility and action, and Macbeth recognizes that moral contamination, moral guilt, that stain on his soul cannot be washed away. It's an image that signals, I think, the beginning of Macbeth's irreversible psychological decline. Now, cross-textually, it's a quotation that foreshadows Lady Macbeth's later obsession with the smell of blood and that desire to wash blood away. It also juxtaposes in this scene her belief in the simplicity of concealment. It's a quotation we'll look at in a second. "A little water clears us of this deed." And we can tie it to Macbeth's later fear in the same scene that he has murdered sleep. Sleep as another symbol of innocence. So talking of "a little water clears us of that deed," that's our 8th quotation. Quote, "A little water clears us of this deed," from Act 2, Scene 2. And immediately after Macbeth, as we've just learned, expresses terror, Lady Macbeth, surprisingly, as a woman, from the vantage point of an audience at the time, responds with a kind of chilling practicality. Her understatement of little, just a little water, reveals her naive belief that guilt is a physical rather than a moral or psychological stain. It's a line that represents Lady Macbeth's initial rejection of guilt and also at the same time foreshadows the tragic collapse of her mental strength in Act 5. It directly contrasts then with the quote, "out damn spot" in Act 5, Scene 1. And it demonstrates that reversal of power within their marriage. Over the course of the play, Macbeth grows increasingly hardened. In this moment, Macbeth is perhaps at his most at his weakest, at his most pathetic in some ways, and Lady Macbeth seems tough. But as the play progresses, Macbeth becomes emotionally hardened and callous and unfeeling, and it's Lady Macbeth that becomes more and more emotional. She's the one that unravels in that very emotional way. And we can connect both of those quotations, both "a little water clears us of this deed" and "will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand." We can connect both quotations to the idea of denial and repression. Okay, nearly there. Just a couple of quotations. Next, Macbeth doth murder sleep, Act 2, Scene 2. Macbeth hears a voice crying this after murdering Duncan. Now, murder links psychological destruction with physical violence, while sleep symbolizes innocence, peace, and a kind of restoration of calm and contentment, or calmness and contentment. Thematically, Macbeth feels that his crime, his regicidal crime, has destroyed his capacity for rest and moral stability. His conscience becomes then a source of guilt and torment. Now, cross-textually, of course, we can link this to Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking and her inability to sleep properly, and it parallels the insomnia that fuels Macbeth's paranoia, especially Macbeth's obsession or growing obsession with Banquo. So it's a quotation that shows moral corruption and how that moral corruption is fundamentally intertwined or connected to political instability in Scotland. Okay, we're going to really skip on now towards the end of the play. Act 5, Scene 1, Out Damned Spot. Now, this is Lady Macbeth sleepwalking, and she's trying to wash imaginary blood from her hands. Damned, okay, reflects her fear of eternal punishment, damnation, going to hell. Spot symbolizes that permanent mark or stain of sin. This quotation is really the dramatic fulfillment of her earlier denial. It is her psychological collapse, and it's revealing the depth of her internalized guilt. It contrasts directly then with "a little water clears us of this deed." It mirrors Macbeth's early recognition of moral stain and that reference to all of Neptune's oceans, and it reveals the complete breakdown of Macbeth's partnership, of the Macbeth's partnership and marriage. She is alone, she's tormented, and she is powerless. Okay, last but one. Quotation 11, Act 5, Scene 5. Really simple. Signifying nothing. Now, this is part of Macbeth's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow soliloquy after he's informed of Lady Macbeth's death by suicide. Nothing is that expression of nihilism, literally a belief in nothing. Macbeth has come to the terrifying, traumatic, and tragic conclusion that life itself is meaningless and that human ambition ultimately leads to emptiness. This is Macbeth's philosophical, spiritual, and emotional collapse. The man, once driven by ambition, now sees existence and life itself as futile and meaningless. We can link it to Walking Shadow, Poor Player, and Brief Candle from the same soliloquy. We can contrast it with his earlier belief in destiny and his own greatness, and it reflects the utter and total disintegration of Macbeth's moral compass. And so, our final quotation, quotation 12, quote, "This dead butcher and his fiend-like queen," Act 5, Scene 9. Now, this is Malcolm, who is now restored to his rightful place as King of Scotland. Malcolm, the rightful king, is offering his final judgment after Macbeth's death at the hands of Macduff. The word butcher reduces Macbeth to a horrible, cruel, violent murderer without any sense of honour. Fiend-like suggests Lady Macbeth's alliance with evil. And it's a line then that thematically summarises how Scotland will remember them. This is a moment really where there is kind of the memorialisation in a terrible, awful way. This is how Scotland is going to remember them. Macbeth has fallen from brave Macbeth to a dead butcher. And it's a line then that completes his tragic arc. Note how this line opposes the glowing praise that Macbeth receives in Act 1, Scene 2. It's a line that confirms to the audience that tyranny leads to a legacy not of greatness, but of horror and violence and disgust. And it restores, maybe, it restores the moral order after the chaos of the play. So, to conclude, this is not an exhaustive list, but these 12 quotations map out Macbeth's descent from heroic warrior to isolated tyrant, and from that ambitious partnership between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth to their, in different ways, but to their psychological ruin. So by learning, revising these key lines, these key quotations, you can use them to write about pretty much any of the major themes: ambition, guilt, supernatural, kingship, gender, deception, violence, and indeed moral disorder. Use these quotations, connect them to other quotations within the 12 and beyond, and to other key moments in the play, and you can use these quotations to build your essays. So, very best of luck in your mock exam. You've absolutely got this for Wednesday. I'm sure you're going to do a brilliant job. Try your best. Use these resources and all of the other myriad resources that your teachers have given you on Google Classroom. Okay, so best of luck for Wednesday, and I hope it goes really well.